This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include former House Speaker Joe Mavretic, Chris Fitzsimon from NC Policy Watch, John Hood from the John Locke Foundation, and former Lieutenant Governor Dennis Wicker. This week on Spin, we get our panel to give you their reactions to Governor McCrory's State of the State address. We talk about bills currently working their way through our legislature, tell about what one county is doing to lower health care costs, and if we get time, we're going to discuss the North Carolina Railroad. We've got a big agenda, so let's get started. Governor Pat McCrory delivered his first State of the State address Monday night, and we want our panel to give you their impressions of his speech. Question one to everybody. Give the governor a letter grade with an A being the highest for his speech, and tell us what stood out for you in the speech. Dennis, we'll start with you.
Well, being the conservative that I am, Tom, and the tough grader, I would give the governor a B+, A-, somewhere in that area. I thought that stylistically he did seem a little uncomfortable from reading the speech. I think Governor McCrory is not very comfortable doing that. But I thought substantively he stayed consistent. I think he avoided any of the mind traps with respect to trying to step on toes with an aggressive and fairly assertive legislature, you know. And I thought he was right on the content in terms of the parameters upon which he was going to try to get things done in the state. There was some criticism about no detail, but, you know, State of the State speeches are never about details. They're about the vision and the broad policy questions you want to address, because you've got to work with the General Assembly to get those kinds of things through. And everybody has a different idea about things. So I thought it was a good speech, and I thought that a B+, A- was a good
Chris, what's your grade?
I'd say a C- or a D+. I disagree with Dennis significantly. I thought the strong points of the speech were his talk about addiction and substance abuse and his call to fund the drug courts again. And I thought the ending of the speech was very good when he talked about we're all in this together. It doesn't matter our party. Otherwise, I really thought it was a rehash of his campaign speech. I've heard that speech 50 times. How many times can you complain about the driver's license at the DMV? I mean, that's funny, but he said it 20 times, and, you know, let's get on with it already. And I disagree with Dennis about big things. Governor Martin came to the legislature in his first speech and said, I want to repeal the intangibles tax, I want to repeal the other taxes, I want to do this. Jim Hunt came to the General Assembly in '93, said, I want to start an early childhood program. Here's a way we could pay for it. Whether you disagree or agree with those things, I think McCrory didn't lay out really much of a vision. And the final point is I thought he needed, not forgetting his political views, I thought he sort of needed to show folks that he was running the state. I think there's a real question that the General Assembly has not, I don't think, ceded power to him, and they won't unless he sort of seizes it himself. And he missed an opportunity, I think, to tell the people of North Carolina, you voted for me, you elected me, I'm in control. We might be in the same party, but I'm setting this agenda this year, and I'm not sure he did that.
Joe?
I'd give him an A for the first State of the State speech as governor. I disagree with something Chris said relative to the DMV. Here's a guy who, as the mayor of Charlotte, went into the DMV and spent an hour waiting. He hadn't forgotten that. When he gets to be the governor, he says, we're going to do this better. And I guarantee you that over the next 6 months, you're going to see some changes in DMV and how they handle the public.
Cut it down to 45 minutes?
Whatever. The other thing is, with regard to the specifics, when he looked up in the gallery and talked to those folks and his wife about addiction, I think he lost his place on his speech outline. But if you paid attention, and not a single person in the media has said anything about it, if you looked at him, I almost thought he was going to tear up. He is a guy with a wife who lives their faith and their beliefs. And if you didn't get that out of that speech, you aren't very good at body language and reading what people are saying.
John, what's your grade?
Well, I'd give the speech a B. I thought it was good, but not great. I think the major performance note that I would give him is about halfway through, it was pretty obvious that his voice was getting a little tired. I think a swig of water would have been good. At about that time, there should have been a glass of water. He could have gone for that.
Where is Rubio when we need him?
What I would say on the content is I agree with Chris in a sense that McCrory's speech was very different from Jim Martin's speech in '85 or Jim Hunt's various State of the States. But I think that was appropriate. I think when McCrory went to the legislature the other day to give his address, I think he saw himself as the chief executive of the executive branch, not as the leader of the state and everybody has to do what he says, but somebody whose first task is to get the executive branch in shape. And a lot of his themes had to do with that. They had to do with management and people and the philosophy of government. And it's true that he didn't really lay out a specific policy agenda. That, I think, is an accurate advertisement that while McCrory does have some initiatives he's going to fight for, he does expect the legislature to be taking the lead on a lot of policy
But Dennis,
issues.
let's go back to this for just a second. I hear what you're saying about previous State of the State speeches being more broad vision and so forth like that. A lot of people said that McCrory really needed to establish himself. You were saying this essentially as the leader of North Carolina. Did he do that?
Well, I don't think you establish yourself as the leader in one speech. I mean, I think this is sort of a silly notion. And he's not been one that's been around Raleigh. This is a guy that was the mayor of Charlotte who's come to Raleigh to be governor. That's a huge transition. I think with experience, I think with time, with the building of relationships, with his personality, I think he will show leadership as he did in Charlotte. Everybody agrees that in Charlotte he was a great mayor over there. And I think he can do the same kinds of things in North Carolina. Tom, I'm going to reserve judgment on him and give him a chance to see how he operates. That's
the question I think a lot of people were asking themselves is, in that speech, did he show himself to be the centrist, the moderate person that people thought they elected, or did he show himself to be too far to the right, or maybe even...
Oh, no, I think you're asking a question that can't be answered, Tom. If you have a bias, if you come from a liberal bias, as Chris does, then you're going to find all kind of faults with that speech. If you come from a conservative bias, then you're going to say there's a lot of good stuff in there. I don't think you can ever get away from that. Let me go back to the point that Chris made earlier, though, about leadership. There's no such thing as a person who leads this state. There's no such thing as a person who leads this country. We have three branches of government. They're not supposed to be co-equal, and they're not supposed to be intertwined. He's the executive. The General Assembly has a role to play. And to tell you the truth, I lived through a day when we had a governor in North Carolina who cracked the whip over the General Assembly. I don't want to go back to that.
Well, nobody's talking about cracking a whip, but I think we deserve to know what the governor thinks of key issues that are facing North Carolina. Tax reform is a huge issue. We heard the same sort of generalities about tax reform. There are specific things that he could have said, and he chose not to. He must have a reason to do that. But I think, I'm not saying he's in charge of North Carolina, but he's the elected leader of North Carolina. That's the job in the Constitution, to set the agenda, to present a budget, to do all those sorts of those things. And other governors, not just Jim Hunt, Jim Martin, and a lot of other ones have taken that opportunity to do that. That's all I'm saying.
But I will tell you, we got to keep in mind, to get the things done that a governor wants to get done, you've got to have a working relationship with that General Assembly. And if you go in there in the State of the state and you say to that General Assembly, here's what I'm going to do, and here's how I'm going to do it, and these are the details I want you to follow so that we can get it done, you're going to fall on deaf ears.
You're going to lose.
You're going to lose.
I don't know. Governor Martin got his taxes repealed right after he proposed it.
And I'll tell you what, I was in the body when that happened, and I will tell you there are a lot of things he didn't get done because of that, Chris.
But I'm just telling you that governors can lay out and
they can. Jim Hunt had a poster in his office in his second administration that had 8 points. These are the things that I want to accomplish. That's fine. But I guarantee you that it took him a while before he decided what those 8 were.
I agree.
You need to also go back to the first State of the state in the first Hunt administration. It was not a piece of brilliance either. So we've had both sides, both kinds over the years.
Anything else about the State of the state that impresses you? We don't have much time left in this segment.
I'm impressed with Chris's theory, which I agree with, that McCrory's success will be predicated on how many taxes he cuts. If he can cut taxes just like in, he will succeed.
Did you say that, Chris?
I did not say that. It's not the first time John has put words in my mouth.
But, Tom, you know, right now, the newspaper today talked about legislative members, House and Senate, who have come to the governor's mansion for breakfast with the governor. Great groundwork.
Yeah. Jim Hunt was the master at doing that.
He was the master at it because he knew he had to work with legislators to get things done, and he was able to do it.
Right.
All right, when we come back after these messages, we're going to talk about some legislative proposals.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Before NC lawmakers tackle immigration reform, they need to understand it's a billion-dollar issue. State legislatures in Georgia and Alabama have passed stringent laws that have decimated their agribusiness economy, leaving crops in the field to die and costing their farmers millions of dollars in lost revenue. Before we hurt our farmers, let's think about a responsible immigration policy that works. Prosperous farms create good jobs right here at home. Paid for by NC Farm Bureau.
Tired of stop-and-go traffic? Travel by train. It's convenient, safe, and affordable. Visit bytrain.org for more information.
Betty Ray McCain is one of North Carolina's most colorful and enjoyable persons. From her small-town upbringing to her 8 years as Secretary of Cultural Resources, Betty has hundreds of stories about people, places, and events. You are invited to attend a special Carolina Collection event, An Evening with Betty Ray McCain, at the North Carolina Museum of History on Tuesday, March 12th at 5:30 p.m. The evening includes a reception with heavy hors d'oeuvres, followed by an hour-long interview with Betty Ray McCain in the NC Museum of History auditorium. Tickets are $25 and group rates are available. Seating is limited, so make your reservations now. Visit ncspin.com or call 919-832-1416. The presenting sponsor for this Carolina Collection event is Touchstone Energy, and the reception sponsor is the North Carolina Democratic Party. Register now at ncspin.com or 919-832-1416.
We now return to NC Spin.
Nobody can accuse our legislature of not getting down to business. The pace of this session is fast, with plenty of meaningful legislation already proposed, and we want to highlight some of the bills introduced, get our panel's reactions to them. Joe, one of the more significant measures would see the State Bureau of Investigation move from the Attorney General's office over to the Department of Public Safety. Now, this has been proposed before. Attorney General Roy Cooper has opposed it and is doing so again. But the SBI has come under a lot of criticism. Is this a good idea to move it to public safety?
Yes, stop the bleeding, and I suspect that the Attorney General's doing a Burr Rabbit on this one.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I think we need an independent SBI lab out from under state government that has its own authority, that can be an independent voice. It's not supposed to be part of the prosecution or state government. It's supposed to be one place where we get data, testing, and a lot of other things. And other states have had independent labs. That was a recommendation made and not accepted by a commission that was looking into this. That would solve the whole problem and take it out of politics.
Perhaps the bill that's caused as much discussion as any after the Medicaid and unemployment insurance bills has been Senate Bill 10, Dennis. The bill that would eliminate 15 boards and commissions, 11 others would be, 15 would be eliminated or changed, 11 would be eliminated and replaced 130 appointed officials. Republicans say this reorganization is long overdue. Democrats say it's a power grab. What do you say?
Well, somewhere I think in between maybe is the truth. I think that quite frankly, you want some experience and some institutional knowledge on these boards and commissions. I think it serves the citizenry well to have that on there. And when they wipe them all out, it's going to eliminate all of that. And I don't think that's good policy for the state. But at the same time, they said they were going to come in and do some things, and they are doing it. They're doing what they said they would do when they ran. But I would say that you're going to see a lot of wisdom go out the door if that bill passes, and I don't think that's good for the state of North Carolina.
Joe, you and Dennis both served in the legislature. Is there a precedent for this in North Carolina?
Oh, yeah. We had a bad Wildlife Resources Commission, and we vanished it for one day, for 24 hours, and then reconstituted it.
All right, that's one. That's one
of them. I've always heard, I don't know if this is true or not, but I've always heard that in the past it would be very difficult for you to get a gubernatorial appointment to the Utilities Commission unless the big utilities in the state signed off on you. I've always thought that was a little bit funny, if that was true.
What makes you think this is going to be any difference? John, what do you think of this bill?
I think that the House is going to take a careful look at it. I think Dennis is capturing what a lot of people, including Republicans in the General Assembly, think, which is on the one hand, they're convinced there were some last-minute patronage appointments that annoy them. They're convinced that they need a quicker turnaround from Democratic appointees to Republican appointees in the administration. But some of them are also concerned about starting at ground zero or losing people who know about particular issues or particular cases. So I think it'll be more deliberate as the House looks at it.
Well, I just want to say, sadly, I think House Speaker Tillis, though, has basically endorsed the gist of the bill. He doesn't like the special judges that are going to be eliminated. I think this is a really bad precedent, a bad idea. You have commissioners appointed 8-year terms. They're really not 8-year terms. They're only 8-year terms unless the parties change in the governor's mansion. Governor McCrory will get his appointments. Those people will come up for appointments like they're always going to come up. He'll easily put his stamp on state government.
But you've put your finger on something here. Part of this bill that I haven't seen discussed in the media is going to change the appointive process. All of a sudden, the governor is not going to have quite as many appointments, as I understand it, under this bill.
That's a critical understanding here, because the initial reaction was, oh, Governor McCrory is acting through his agents in the legislature to get all this power. Actually, the bill takes power away from the governor and gives the legislative leaders a bit more control over some of these boards. I'm not sure that's right in every case. We already have mixtures of governance between legislative and gubernatorial appointments in other areas. I think we need to make a rational policy here about this. And Chris, I understand your point about, you don't really have an 8-year term if you're going to flip them before that time. My argument would be, don't have 8-year terms.
But let's do that in an organized way, not a bill that came out that Tom Apodaca, the Senate Rules Chair, brought up in the committee, no debate, nothing else, hardly any discussion, passed through the Senate before people knew even what was in it.
Tom, these were very substantive boards and commissions. You're talking about the Industrial Commission. You're talking about
Utilities Commission.
You're talking about the Coastal
Resources Commission.
These are very substantive boards and commissions. You can make the political argument that the Democrats would say, fine, wipe them out, appoint new ones, but you can't blame anything on us that happens.
But how do you respond to the charge that many of the Republicans are making, is that they were political appointments to start off with? Why are you getting upset because we want to make our political appointments?
I think you ought to be able to have support throughout executive branch for the party in power. I think you ought to be able to review things every so often. On this show, I've often said every 25 years we ought to have constitutional review in North Carolina so that the next generation has a say in the way in which we live. Well, we're long overdue for that, and so this kind of thing, though it is jarring, probably needs to be done.
All right, next week we're going to take on some more of these issues because we spent more time talking about Senate Bill 10 than I had intended to do, but I think it is an important bill and worth the discussion. But next week we'll talk about that. When we come back, we're going to ask, losing weight or losing money? Which would you prefer?
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Not all high school graduates go to college. Not all employers need college graduates. Are North Carolina's public schools preparing graduates with the skills employers need now? Join the discussion. Visit nceducate.com.
This is Robert. Hey, yeah, still going. Well, I talked to them and they gave me some options. Yeah, it does. I think it's going to work.
We now return to NC Spin.
Our healthcare system is unsustainable, and everybody talks about lowering healthcare costs, but few are willing to do anything about it. Cumberland County employees got the message they have an important part to play in better health. So starting in 2014, the county is going to require their employees to meet health improvement targets to continue to receive lower cost premiums. And if they don't, they're going to pay higher premiums. Question one to John. What do you think of Cumberland County's actions? Is this a signal of things to come?
Well, it's a signal of things that might come and that probably ought to come, but we'll have to see if that kind of a patient incentive system is attempted on a broader scale, whether it would be considered legal under the Affordable Care Act. There are some aspects of that that might clash with some of the federal regulations that are still to be written that have to do with chasing risk out of the premium setting business. I think that there should be patient incentives, not only incentives in the form of differential premiums based upon risk that you bring to the pool, but also incentives not to consume care. If we really want to be serious about health care costs, yes, we have to address the people, the relatively small number of people with very expensive conditions and whether those can be headed off before they become expensive conditions. But also we need to discourage people from consuming health care of marginal utility. And one of the ways you do that is give patients incentives not to consume care.
Yeah, but Chris, I think this raises a basic equity question, fairness question from the standpoint of should people who are healthy have to pay the same premium as those people who aren't healthy?
Well, but there's two things going on. One is insurance is sort of based on the fact that everybody pays because there's all sorts of different risks and all sorts of different costs. That's what insurance really is that we have a giant pool. Everybody's cost is lower because everybody's paying in. Right. Yeah. That's the first thing. But what's interesting about this is we already do this. Call up any insurer in North Carolina and say you want an individual policy. The first question they ask is, do you smoke? We already, that is the market already does that for us. What I'm not sure about in Cumberland County, I've seen employers do a version of this where it's a carrot, not a stick, which is here's your insurance premium. Not that it's going to go up if you don't do something, but that it'll go down if you do something affirmatively.
But if you're an employer, your health care premiums are set, and you understand some are going to have better health than some are others, but they're trying to incentivize this, Joe.
Absolutely, and I think it's wonderful. I came from the Marine Corps. Every year we took a physical fitness test. You passed the test, good for you. If you didn't pass the test, you got a bad fitness report, you got 30 days to correct it. If not, you probably weren't going to be promoted the next time around. I'm delighted to see Cumberland County do this, but I want them to go further. What I want them to do is to say, look, here's where you ought to be in weight, because it's the number one problem as far as I'm concerned across this state. We are overweight. So you say, look, you're overweight. You gotta lose weight. You gotta come down to your standard. We're going to do everything we can to help you. But if you don't help yourself, you're going to pay more money. And if you continue not to help yourself, if you continue to do that, we are going to take away your job. Now, I think we have a governor and a first lady who are poster people for being the right weight, for looking good, for being in shape. And they don't have to say a word.
But Dennis, can you make people lose weight? Can you?
Well, I think you can incentivize people. You can modify behavior with money in a lot of ways, Tom. And so I will tell you that I think that this is something.
Speaking as an attorney,
but I will tell you that the thing that we got to understand is that the healthcare system is changing radically, and the providers are going to be squeezing every nickel they can. And this is a way; it's a stick approach. But yeah, if it's going to cost you more money to be overweight or you smoke, then they're going to have to pay the piper.
You have to be very careful.
I want to talk about this when we come back after the break, because we hadn't finished on this subject yet. Be with us when we come back.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
Be sure to reserve your seat for an evening with Betty Ray McCain, Tuesday, March 12th at the NC Museum of History. Tickets are $25 and can be purchased at ncspin.com or 919-832-1416.
Back discussing this issue of Cumberland County and their health insurance. John, talking about insurance premiums, you said on this show last week that people who are buying individual policies for insurance are going to see a 100% rate increase, group policies 30 to 50%. Is that what we're looking at?
Yes, depends on how old you are and what your risks are. And that's why this is related, because the federal law is requiring premiums to be generated on community rating, and because the insurance policies will be more expensive because of federal regulation than they currently are, young people with relatively low health costs will see double or more of premiums.
All right, final comments around the table.
I'm not sure about that, but I will say this about the idea of using a stick approach in measuring things. We have to be very careful. There are a lot of reasons why people say cholesterol is high. If somebody has high cholesterol, you can't set a goal for everybody of lowering it if it's genetic. There are a lot of, it's very complicated.
Somebody 50 pounds overweight, though, they do something about
That's exactly right. There are standards. Every insurance company has its own standards. Nothing wrong with trying to meet those standards and penalizing you if you don't at least try.
All right.
Look, Chris is right. There are things that are fixed. You can't change. They're genetic. But there are a lot of things in the healthcare area that are variable: weight, whether you smoke, whether you drink. Those things you can fix.
Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback and read our weekly column, visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. And we hope you'll join us next week when Henry Hinton will be sitting on this chair, and we'll take on more issues of interest to the people of North Carolina. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.